July 12, 1943. The day that the ground itself trembled at Kursk, Russia, a young nurse named Elena Morozova, only 23 years old, opened her small leather diary and wrote in faded ink, "The air smells of oil, blood, and burning metal. Tanks roar like thunder. I hear the wounded calling for help, and I am not sure if I can save them all." Elena was one of over 6,000 Soviet nurses stationed near the front lines during the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in human history. What she did not know was that her diary, hidden under rubble and rediscovered decades later, would tell a story not of soldiers, but of courage, compassion, and how the Allied spirit, especially American aid and technology, helped turn the tide of war. The Battle of Kursk began in July 1943, when Nazi Germany launched Operation Citadel, hoping to crush the Soviet army with a massive pincer movement. More than 3,000 German tanks, including the fearsome Tiger and Panther, rolled across the Russian plains. Facing them were more than 3,600 Soviet tanks, including T-34s, many of which were equipped with American-supplied radios, aluminum, and truck parts delivered under the Lend-Lease program, a silent American contribution that helped keep the Soviet war machine alive. For Elena, it wasn't about tanks or strategy. It was about survival. She worked in a makeshift field hospital built inside a ruined farmhouse near the village of Prokhorovka. Each hour, trucks brought in dozens of wounded, some burned, some crying, many silent. She wrote, "We had only a few bandages left. We tore our uniforms to make more. I remember holding a boy's hand as he whispered, 'Tell my mother I fought for her.'" I didn't know his name. In her diary, Elena noted something remarkable. Among the Soviet supply convoys were American Studebaker trucks, sturdy, reliable vehicles that brought ammunition, food, and medical kits to the front. She wrote, "When we hear the Studebakers, we cheer. They bring morphine, chocolate, and hope. That morphine, made in U.S. factories, saved countless Soviet lives. The chocolate came from American soldiers stationed in England and Alaska, who sent small care boxes eastward through the Arctic convoys. In the darkest nights, that small taste of sweetness reminded the nurses that they were not alone." On July 12th, near Prokhorovka, one of the fiercest clashes in world history erupted. More than 1,200 tanks fought across a 6-mile field, turning the earth into a furnace. Elena's diary records. The ground was shaking. The sky was black with smoke. I could not hear my own heartbeat. Then they came. Rows of wounded, faces covered with dust and ash. I worked until my hands bled. It was in those hours that she noticed new supplies arriving. American-made plasma units, part of a joint medical shipment through Iran. Those units, designed by U.S. medical researchers, were lifesavers. Elena used them on over 30 men that day. She didn't know it then, but her actions mirrored thousands of nurses, American, British, and Soviet, all bound by the same silent promise: to save life in the middle of death. Historians now know that Kursk was the turning point on the Eastern Front. The Soviets destroyed nearly 500 German tanks in a matter of days. German Field Marshal Erich von Manstein later admitted, "The offensive at Kursk broke the backbone of our armored forces." But Elena's words capture the human truth. When we heard the Germans retreating, we did not celebrate. We just sat on the ground. Too many were gone. As Soviet troops advanced, they carried with them not only courage, but the fruits of Allied cooperation, American fuel, British intelligence, and the unbreakable belief that fascism could be defeated if the free world stood together. In 1991, long after the Soviet Union collapsed, a team of archivists cleaning a military hospital in Kursk found a small, leather-bound notebook behind a wall. It was Elena's diary. Inside were 48 pages of writings. Personal, emotional, yet historically priceless. The pages mentioned American Red Cross medical kits, Jeep ambulances, and even letters from U.S. nurses sent through the wartime alliance. One passage read, "I never met an American, but I thank them every day. Their gifts keep my boys alive. One day, maybe I will write to them and say thank you." For a historian, this diary gives something numbers can't: emotion. Over 800,000 men fought at Kursk, and nearly 250,000 Germans were killed or wounded. But behind every statistic stood people like Elena, unarmed, uncelebrated, and yet as brave as any soldier. And far away across the Atlantic, American workers, us, women in factories, men in shipyards, kept the flow of aid going. Between 1941 and 1945, the United States sent over $11 billion worth of supplies to the Soviet Union. 400,000 trucks, 13,000 tanks, 14,000 aircraft, and nearly 2 million tons of food and medicine. Without it, the Red Army might never have recovered in time for Kursk. Elena's story also reminds us of the American heroes who never stepped onto the Russian front but fought for it in other ways. The Arctic convoy sailors who braved freezing seas and Nazi submarines to deliver cargo to Murmansk and Archangel. The American pilots of the Alaska-Siberia route who flew through blizzards to bring planes to Soviet airfields. The nurses in American hospitals who developed new blood transfusion techniques later used by Soviet doctors. They were silent heroes, no medals, no glory, but their fingerprints are all over Elena's diary. Elena's final diary entry was dated August 4, 1943. The battle has moved west. The wounded are fewer now. I keep hearing that victory is coming. I pray it's true. I hope one day someone will remember us. The ones who cleaned wounds while the world burned. She died 2 weeks later, likely of infection. No grave was found, but her words live on. A testament not just to her courage, but to the unity of nations that believed evil must be stopped, whatever the cost. When the diary was translated, American historians took special note of Elena's gratitude. In 2003, a small memorial was placed in Kursk with the inscription, "To the nurses who healed the wounded, and to the allies who gave them hope." Her story, forgotten for nearly 50 years, became a bridge between nations, proof that the fight against tyranny was not only about armies, but about shared humanity. In every drop of plasma, every crate of food, every whisper of comfort, the American spirit was there. In the end, the forgotten diary of a Soviet nurse at Kursk reminds us of something timeless. Wars may be fought by soldiers, but they are won by compassion, courage, and cooperation. And when the world seemed to fall apart, it was the bond between a Soviet nurse and the unseen American heroes that helped piece it back together.